I watched Channel 4's Game of Wool, so you don't have to, and I had to re-record this segment because we have new information. So I've talked about what I liked, I talked about what I didn't like, and I've now got on to responding to some critiques that I've seen online. And I had a whole segment that I'd already done talking about two things. One, the yarn they used, and two, the person who went home. And it turns out I was a little bit too charitable to the showrunners on that front. So many thanks to Gordon of Man Knitting Scotland for the behind the scenes information, because I think the edit did him dirty. So let's talk about the yarn and the needles they were using. So a lot of people online were complaining that they had forced the contestants to use this very chunky yarn and these very chunky needles that many of them said they weren't comfortable with. However, in my original draft, I pushed back on the idea that they were forced to use this chunky yarn and chunky needles. It was actually that just the constraints of the task they had been set and the time they'd been given to do it in meant that it was unreasonable to do anything other than big needles and big yarn. Turns out that's not true. They did have to use a specific yarn, and that we now know that is Rowan's Big Wool. I do think it's a bit off that. So for the sewing bee, everyone gets the same sewing machine, the same serger. For the throwdown, everyone gets the same wheel. For the bake-off, everyone gets the same oven, the same mixer. Everyone has the same equipment. It was very obvious that everyone was using their own needles on the Game of Wool, because some people had nice Addi interchangeables that are extremely recognisable and that are maybe the ones that they chose and are very comfortable with, and then some people just had some stuff that they had acquired. And I will get back to that when we get into the person who went home and why they went home. And it's a tough one, because on the one hand, everyone should have an equal playing field, and everyone using the same wool is one way of doing that, but I do think the needles are more important. But also, can you, as a show, provide 10 sets of every size of needle in straights, circulars, and DPNs? Probably not. So I don't actually know how you square that circle, but I think the answer here might be to just standardise what needles people are allowed to use for any given project if you're already standardising the yarn, and provide them. Finally, I've seen a couple of conspiracy theories online about the fact that immediately after the show, Rowan, who it would appear is providing all of the wool for the show, came out with kits for some of the vests that we saw. I don't know why this was surprising. The Sewing Bee has done a book basically every year. The goal of a lot of people who get to the final rounds of Bake Off is getting their own book deal, and lots of them have, and it's really hard to monetize the throwdown, but my understanding is that if people have seen you on the throwdown, they will want to buy your pottery. Ask me why we own a Rose Schmidt crawler pot. But I've procrastinated enough, let's talk about the person who went home.